Hello, hello, welcome back. We're entering Unit 2.1, which looks at the mechanisms of homeostasis and bioengineering. And we are going to focus on Part 1, which is interacting systems of organisms. So let me adjust my camera. Put that back right up there. All right. So let's go ahead and get started on our first section of notes, shall we? All right, so interacting systems. Complex organisms need multiple systems to function and survive. So what that means is that if you were to look at any multicellular organism, they have different systems that allow them to survive. For us, we have our respiratory system, our circulatory system, our digestive system. We have all these different systems. And this is because of something called cell differentiation. So way back when you were just a glob of cells in your mommy's tummy, specifically her uterus, what happens is you're actually made up of a whole bunch of stem cells. Stem cells are cells that haven't been told what kind of cell to be. And what happens is at a point during our development, the cells are programmed. So cells that are programmed to be stomach cells will turn off any gene that isn't necessary for them to be a stomach cell. And cells that are neurons will turn off any genes that are not necessary for them to be neurons. Kind of like you can see here in this picture at the bottom, which we will kind of look at another one later on. So we have stem cells. Some of them can be programmed to become muscle cells or blood cells, etc. And then what happens is these programmed cells can then go through mitosis and work together to build a larger structure like a stomach. And then the cells that are programmed to be the large and small intestines will work with that stomach in order to help create the digestive system. So it allows different cells to form your different tissues like skin and different types of muscles, smooth muscles versus cardiac muscles, as well as different organs like your liver or your lung or your heart. So it's actually kind of really cool that this occurs all on its own. So here's a picture of cell differentiation. Remember, every cell in your body has the full DNA to make you, but they're not all using the same parts of that code. They're not using all the same parts of the DNA because there's a whole bunch of different genes. And in some of them, certain genes will be turned on while other genes are turned off. Now, a stem cell is just a cell with the entire DNA, but it hasn't been told what to be. However, it can be programmed to be a muscle cell, in which case the genes that are necessary to make muscle cells and to help muscle cells function, those will be turned on. All the other genes will be turned off. Same if it's to be a sex cell or an immune cell or epithelial cell, that's skin cells, or nervous cells like this neuron here. Blood cells, whether it's white blood cells, red blood cells, a bone cell, or a fat cell. So they all have the exact same DNA inside of them. However, they're only using very particular sections of the DNA in terms of what genes are being expressed. Every single one of these are going to have the same DNA, except for, well, the gametes, because they only have half of the DNA. But muscle cells, immune cells, skin cells, nervous cells, bone cells, heart cells, etc. All of them have the same DNA, your DNA. But each one only has particular genes turned on, and that's what allows it to do the job of a muscle cell or a fat cell or a bone cell, etc. Now let's look a little bit at organization, shall we? All right, so we're looking at organization purely on an organism level. So I know we've talked about ecological organization and life organization. Sorry. But this, we're just looking purely on an organism, specifically a multicellular organism. So we begin with the cell. Cell is the basic unit of life. It is the smallest thing that we consider to be alive. It's the smallest thing that has all of those characteristics of life. But then cells can come together to form a tissue. Tissue is similar cells that work together to form a job. So for instance, the inner lining of your stomach, that's a particular tissue, and they're all working together. You have a whole bunch of cells that make the inner lining of your stomach, and those come together to do the same job. They come together to secrete digestive enzymes and start the absorption process of nutrients. Groups of tissues that carry out a specific job in the body is known as an organ. So for instance, your stomach is made up of different types of tissues. The inner lining is one type of tissue. The outer lining is another type of tissue. At the top, connected to the esophagus, you have the cardiac sphincter, and at the bottom, where it connects with the intestines, you have the pyloric sphincter. So you have these different tissues that come together to make this one organ, the entire stomach. And if you have multiple organs coming together to do a job, we call that an organ system. Organ systems are two or more organs working together to perform body functions. So the stomach is one organ. Well, if we take the stomach and the small intestines and the large intestines and the liver and the pancreas and the esophagus, etc., now we have a body system. We have an organ system, specifically the digestive system. And if you take all of the organ systems and look at them working together, that's where you have your organism. So I am an organism. I am made up of body systems that work together to keep me alive. I have a digestive system, respiratory system, nervous system, muscle system, skeletal system, etc. So to review this, cell is the smallest unit of life. A group of cells that work together forms a tissue. A group of tissues that work together form an organ. A group of organs that work together form an organ system. A group of organ systems that work together form the entire organism. All right, so I hope that helps you kind of understand the different levels of organization. And now let's get on with talking about our organ systems. So organ systems are, like we said, when two or more organs are working together to perform some kind of job in the body. Now, in humans, we have 11 main organ systems. In no particular order. It's reproductive, respiratory, endocrine, nervous, integumentary, skeletal, digestive, muscular, excretory, immune, and circulatory. And then once we're done looking at each one of those briefly, then we'll look at pictures of all of them. All right, are we ready to dive in? Yes, let's go. Let's start with circulatory system. So for each system, we're going to talk about the main components and organs involved, as well as the primary functions. So in the circulatory system, the main components are the heart, blood vessels such as the arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins, the blood cells, lymph nodes, and the lymphatic vessels. The primary functions of your circulatory system is to move things throughout your body. So for instance, it moves oxygen from your lungs to every cell in your body. It moves nutrients from your intestines to every cell in your body. It moves hormones from different glands and organs all around your body. And it's also going to collect the waste, like the carbon dioxide from your cells, and move those to the lungs so we can get rid of them. It's going to collect waste from your cells and take them to the kidney where they can be filtered out and disposed of. Your circulatory system also helps to regulate your body temperature. We can dilate, expand our blood vessels, or constrict them, squeeze them up in order to maintain internal warmth or to help cool the body down. We'll talk more about that in another section. All right, excretory system. This is also sometimes known as the urinary system. And the main components are the skin, the kidneys, and the bladder. Primary function is to filter blood as well as to eliminate waste. So in the kidneys, they filter the blood and they pull out excess water or ions or lactic acid. They pull out all these things that we don't want to keep in the blood. And then they send them to the bladder where it waits until we are ready to get rid of them, in which case then we, well, put it lightly, we go pee-pee. The reason why skin is because we can also get rid of certain ions and waste by sweating. That's not the primary function of sweat, but it is something that can occur. That's why like people talk about the meat sweats. Like if you have too high of a salty food, sometimes you feel sweaty afterwards. It's because your body's trying to get rid of that excess, those excess salts and ions. All right, the muscular system. So the main components of this are the skeletal muscles, the smooth muscles, and the cardiac muscles. So pretty much all your muscles. The primary functions are to produce voluntary and involuntary movements. So voluntary movements are ones you choose to do. I am choosing to wave my arms around. Those are voluntary movements. Involuntary movements include breathing. Now I know someone's gonna be like, but Miss Komar, I can hold my breath. Yes, and you can hold your breath until you pass out. But once you pass out, your body is going to start breathing all on its own. That's why we don't suffocate when we are asleep. We don't have to think about breathing. Our bodies do it naturally. Now, yes, I can focus on it and I can hold my breath like, but if I was to do that and deprive myself of oxygen, I would pass out. And then when I pass out, my body would start breathing all on its own again. It helps to circulate blood. There are muscles that surround your blood vessels that help to kind of push the blood along. Plus you have, your heart has a lot of muscles in it that when it beats, it helps to push the blood out of the artery or out of the heart and into the arteries, where then it kind of continuously pushes and creates a pressure system that helps to push the blood all throughout your body. You also have muscles that surround your esophagus and work inside your intestines. So around your esophagus, it helps to push food down into your stomach. And then it also helps to move the food, or a byproduct of food, through your intestines, absorbing the good stuff into the circulatory system, but then moving the stuff you don't want, the waste, along your intestines until it's time to get rid of it. All right, the digestive system. We were just kind of briefly talking about this. So this includes the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, the pancreas, the gallbladder, and the liver. Now those last three, the pancreas, gallbladder, and liver, the food doesn't go into those. Like we could track food from your mouth down to your pharynx, esophagus, stomach, and intestines, and then the waste leaves you. But the pancreas, gallbladder, and liver help to secrete certain enzymes and materials like bile that helps to break down food. The primary function breaks down and absorbs nutrients, salts and other ions, and water. So we chew it. We actually start digesting it in our mouth because there are some digestive enzymes in your saliva. It goes to your stomach, it fully digests and breaks apart mostly, and then it goes into your intestines where we start to absorb the nutrients and the ions and the water, all of it, all the good stuff that we can use out of the mass of stuff. And then we transport it to the bloodstream where it can circulate throughout our body. The stuff that we can't digest will make its way through your small intestines to your large intestines and then to your colon, where it will be gotten rid of in the form of poop. Let's see. And that's the last part where it says eliminates waste. We get rid of it through the act of pooping. All right, the immune system. So this includes the white blood cells as well as the thymus and the spleen. So the thymus and the spleen help to create the different immune components like white blood cells, like antibodies, and all that stuff. The primary function protects against diseases. So this is our internal defense system. It stores and it generates the white blood cells so they can travel through our body and identify and fight infections and infectious agents, whether it's foreign matter that somehow gets into our system, like if you get a cut and there's dirt, it'll help to break those down. It'll also help to destroy any bacteria that enters your system or viruses that enter your system. The skeletal system. So the components of this are your bones, your cartilage, your ligaments, and your tendons. So what this does is it actually supports and protects our vital organs. If you think about the main organs that you think of as necessary for survival, it's your heart, your lungs, and your brain. Well, where are those located? Your heart and your lungs are inside your rib cage. So they're protected by this, well, for lack of a better term, a cage of bones. And your brain is up here inside your skull, protected there by a helmet of bone. But that's not all. It's what allows movements. The muscles connect to the bones and connect to each other. And when we send a message to our muscles to move, they pull on the bones and allow us to actually have support and structure as we move around. They do also store minerals such as calcium, bone marrow, which is the kind of spongy stuff inside the long bones, specifically like your arm bones and your leg bones. This is where red blood cells are produced. The interesting thing about red blood cells is they're actually the only cells without a nucleus, and they do not have any DNA. So when we need to make more red blood cells, it's not the red blood cells that divide to make more. They're created in the bone marrow, and then once they are mature, they're denucleated. So the nucleus is removed from them. They are sent out into the bloodstream to be just a taxi service. Take the good stuff to the cells, take the waste from the cells, and get rid of it. Whenever they talk about getting DNA samples from blood, it's usually not the red blood cells, but the white blood cells that are mixed in where they get the DNA from. All right, the endocrine. This is your hormonal system. So things that create our different hormones include the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the parathyroids, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries, and the testes. So these all make different hormones that will act on all the other tissues and all the other organs in your body. And they do this for different reasons. One, it could be to influence growth. So when we are developing, we have a flood of hormones going through us, both in fetal development as well as puberty. And they allow for both growth. I mean, we do have a human growth hormone, but they also allow for development. You do not look the same as you were when you were a baby. You didn't just get bigger. You're not just a 5.5-foot version of a baby. Your body also developed in different ways, including sexual development. So that is one way, as among other things. Plus metabolism. There are, especially the pancreas, it secretes certain hormones and chemicals, biochemicals like insulin or glucagon that help you regulate your blood sugar. So because of all this, we can say that the endocrine system also helps maintain homeostasis. The integumentary system. So this includes your skin, your hair, your nails, your sweat glands, your oil glands, all those different things. Now remember how we said your immune system was your internal defense? Well, the integumentary system is your external defense. It's your first line of defense. So it protects you against infection. Bacteria and viruses cannot get through your skin. They can't. It's just not possible. But if you have a cut on your skin, that's how they get in, or through a mucosal membrane like your eyes, in your nose, etc. But in terms of infections, your skin is the first line of defense. It protects everything inside your body against foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses. It also protects your organs from UV radiation. Your skin has a particular pigment called melanin in it, and melanin helps to protect against UV rays. That's why people whose ancestors come from areas of the globe where there is a lot more sunlight, like around the equator, tend to have darker pigmented skin because their skin naturally produces higher levels of melanin than someone whose ancestors come from an area of the globe like Northern Europe, where there wasn't as much sunlight. It also helps to regulate your body temperature. It helps us in different ways to kind of cool down. For instance, if you are too hot, it is summer right now, or at least when I'm making this video it is. But as your body gets warm and it starts heating up too high, you sweat. And that sweat is actually going to help to cool your internal body temperature down. We'll talk more about that later, but it's true. All right, nervous system. So the components of this include your brain, your spinal cord, the peripheral nerves, which are the nerves. So your brain, your spinal cord goes through your vertebrae column, your backbone. And then the peripheral nerves are the ones that come off of the spinal cord and go to your extremities and everywhere else in your body. So the nervous system regulates the body's response to changes in the internal environment as well as the external environment. So what we mean by internal environment, for instance, let's say your blood sugar levels get too low. There are specific nerves that have receptors that can sense this. And when they pick up on this signal that the blood sugar is too low, then they send a message to the brain. The brain then sends a message back saying, hey, we gotta fix this. This is how we fix it. Do this. Pancreas, release this chemical, this hormone, and that'll fix it. Again, we'll talk more about that mechanism in another section. In terms of the environment, we also kind of mentioned that already with the integumentary system. When it recognizes that the external temperature is too hot and it can thus affect the internal temperature, it can create receptors, pass that signal onto the nerves. Nerves go to the brain. Brain sends a response back to start sweating. Also, let's say you touch something hot. I'm going to use my little cup here as an example. Don't worry, just water. So if you touch something hot, immediately you're going to jerk your hand back. It's like, ah, just like that. So I want you to think about that for a moment. From the moment your skin touches that, a signal goes from the nerves in your finger through the peripheral nerves to your spine, or the spinal cord, up the spinal cord to your brain. Your brain interprets that signal and then sends a response back down through the spinal cord to the periphery nerves, to the nerves in your finger, saying, this is hot, this is bad, move. Now, it took me a while to explain that, but in terms of how fast it is, it's almost instantaneous. Ouch, hot. So those signals move through your nerves very, very quickly, and it's this quick processing of information that allows us to respond so quickly. As we said, it can process different stimuli like that, but also when you look around you and you see things, those are light stimuli that go through your eye, through the optic nerve to your brain, and then you interpret those images in your brain. When you hear something, it's an auditory stimulus that hits your eardrum, goes through a nerve there to your brain, and it allows you to interpret sound. When you touch something, not necessarily as hot, but again, smooth, bumpy, it all sends signals that go to the brain, and our brain processes those signals and tells us what they need. It's kind of really cool. All right, respiratory. So in the respiratory system, the main components are the nose, the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the trachea, and the lungs. Now, yes, you can breathe through your mouth. And the thing is, like in the back, the pharynx and trachea area, well, trachea is more down here, but in the back here, your nasal cavity actually does meet up with the back of your throat. That's why sometimes, like if you're drinking milk or water and you start laughing, it can come out your nose. It's because it's all connected back there. The primary function of the respiratory system is to bring in oxygen. So when we inhale, the oxygen goes through your nose, navel cavity, down the pharynx, to the trachea, and into your lungs. The lungs are filled with these little kind of bulbous alveoli. Alveoli? I think I'm saying that correctly. I am not a lung expert, but it gets absorbed into those. The lungs are highly vascularized. What that means is that they have a lot of capillaries stretched all over there to maximize contact between the little bulbs in the lungs and the blood vessels. So that is very easy for us to, I don't want to just say transport, diffuse the oxygen from the lungs into the blood vessels, where it's then picked up by the blood cells, and it'll move throughout your body, providing oxygen for every single cell in your body. Now, your cells create carbon dioxide as a waste product. So when the cells deposit the oxygen, they can also pick up the carbon dioxide, or when the blood cells deposit the oxygen, they can pick up the waste product carbon dioxide, carry that to the lungs, and then diffuse it from the blood vessels into the lungs, where we then exhale. So that takes the carbon dioxide from the lungs to the trachea, through the pharynx, and out. We also do exhale water vapor. If you've ever, like kind of breathed on glass, it fogs up. That's because you're breathing out water vapor and it's condensing. It's going back from a gaseous form to a liquid form on the cooler surface of the mirror or glass. You can also see this in the winter when you exhale and you can actually see your breath. That's because the warmer environment of your body keeps the water vapor as a gas. But once it leaves your mouth, once you exhale it, and it's now in this cold environment, it cools down immediately and goes into a liquid state, which is why you can see it. That's water vapor. All right, and last but not least, reproductive system. Now, up until this point, all of those systems that we mentioned, let me go back for a moment. All of the other systems, the other 10, are ones that are necessary for that single organism to survive. So me, I can survive and live a normal life because of the 10 systems we've already talked about. Now, the reproductive system isn't necessarily required for the survival of a single organism like myself. However, in a sexually reproductive species like humans, the reproductive system is essential for the survival of the species as a whole. So we still consider it a system that is required for life because, well, that's how we make the next generation. All right, let's go back to it now. So in humans, males and females do have different organs and components. Males have the testes, the penis, as well as the associated ducts and glands, such as the vas deferens, the prostate gland, the seminal vesicle, etc. Females have the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. Now, the primary function of these are to make our reproductive cells, our gametes, the sperm in males and eggs in females, as well as transport them. So in males, the sperm gets transported from the testes through the different ducts, out the penis, and into the female, where it's deposited in the vagina. The sperm then swim up through the uterus and into the fallopian tubes where they can make contact with the egg. The egg travels from the ovary to the fallopian tubes, and then whether or not fertilization occurs, it'll go from the fallopian tubes and implant into the uterus. If no fertilization has occurred, then each month the egg will be discarded and a new egg will take its place. If it has been fertilized, then the uterus, part of the female reproductive system, provides the environment for embryonic and fetal development. So it provides a safe place where the growing baby can have access to nutrients, oxygen. Mom gets rid of the waste for baby. So it provides an environment that is safe and conducive to nurturing this growing baby organism. Alrighty. And here are just some examples of the pictures. So we have and I know I've had pictures on all the other sides as well, but you know, muscular, skeletal, circulatory, nervous, lymphatic, integumentary, respiratory, endocrine, digestive, excretory, and then reproductive. All right, so now let's go on and just kind of give you some additional resources to look at. All right, so we have one on body systems. Now we do start by talking about organization in the organization. And then we'll go on and talk about some of the body systems. I'm not gonna have us watch it now. Same with the other videos, which include Bozeman's Science, the organ systems. We have Tim Goodwin, the body systems and homeostasis. And we have the Amoeba Sisters, Human Body Systems Functions Overview, the 11 champions. So those are just some good other resources that can help you with understanding the functions of the body systems. I will put a link for this Prezi into the video description so you have access to those other resources. But in the meantime, you guys, if you have questions, hit me up in our Google Classroom or email. And I hope this was informative. So until next time, you guys, stay awesome, stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious. All right, you guys, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.